Well, hello there and welcome to the candy wallpapered upstairs hallway of the dollhouse for another reading from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and you Stelfers for April 28th, the day of Steadfastness. That's right. And here at the top of the page is a visual representational image of the day of Steadfastness. We have what appears to be, what is it? Boom! It's a giant padlock with some ornate decoration under the keyhole. All right, does that speak to the day of steadfastness? I don't know if it does. I can't really make hide nor hair of it. That said, not altogether all too important. I just like folks to see what's on the page in front of me, the dynamic going on off camera, if you like. Sometimes these things are rather enigmatic, so we can't really figure it out. That said, what is important outside the visual representational image is it's April 28th, and hence it's somebody's birthday. So what's important here? Wishing you a happy birthday. That's right. But if this video finds you, I don't know, a couple days late, weeks, months, whatever the case may happen to be, well, I hope you had a happy birthday in that case. That's right. But before we dive in with the redirect, something I like to do around these here parts, and that is roll some dice. But if you've been here before and you know what's going on, or you just want to get to the redirect, hey, just jump ahead in the chapters, no big deal. I'll be here rolling dice because I do so not just for the namesake. This is the Diecast birthday broadcast, but I do so for synchronicity's sake. That's right. And here I rolled us a 1 and a 5 for a 6. Now, what is synchronicity? You may be wondering if you stuck around. Well, my friends, as I hear it told, the universal powers that be will oftentimes put things in our path to help us realize our goals or manifest our aspirations. But oftentimes we got the blinders up to what's going on around us. So those things might pass us by, or we may not lend them much credence if we happen upon them, because we're too narrow a focus on the things ahead of us, or singular a mind to get to work or get the errands done. So hey, you know what? This is a little bit of an experiment to help us drop those blinders and start taking into things that the universe might put in our path, or the higher powers that be, if you like. How do you do this? Well, we need some kind of a signpost to help us recognize these things. That's right, your daily numbers. So if you see the numbers out there in the world, you gotta chase them down, or you can just take them as a little bit of a sign that, hey, I'm on the right track. But if you want to drill down into this, really explore it, you can use the dice to take you on your way. Describe directional values to number sets, say north 1 through 3, east 4 through 6 rather, and so on. You can also ascribe time limits with which to go in those directions, and even get down even further. Say evens and odds for yeses and nos, or lefts and rights. Hey, it's all up to you and what you agree upon with the higher powers that be, all right? But once you get that figured out, pick out a place you want to explore and then set out. All right, but like I said, drop those blinders, because outside your daily numbers, hey, you might start to see the day take on a little bit of a theme. Take the padlock, for instance. You might start seeing padlocks as you're getting on your path there. I don't know, hung up in weird places. Maybe the visual representational image of as much on the likes of advertisements, billboards, bus benches, buses that drive by you, or maybe a bunch of locksmith stores. Who's to say, all right? But it could be just about anything, so you have to be on the lookout. But let's say you roll the dice 5, 6, 7 times, and hey, nothing seems to be happening. Hey, never fret, my friends. Just take a step back, take things in, see what you're doing. At the very least, you're getting your steps in, right? But maybe just taking a moment to compose yourself before you roll the dice for that 8th time. Hey, maybe something happens. Maybe somebody stops by your path, asks you what you're doing. Hey, just be open, cordial, let them know, hey, this crazy guy on the internet suggested I get out for my birthday and shake things up. You explain the process. They probably have to tell you it's crazy. I know you'll probably agree, but what they might say is even crazier is it's their birthday too. Oh, you never know, all right? And I know that sounds a little harebrained, but things can get crazy with such things. But if you experience even just a hint of such things, such happenstances coming across your path, hey, I think you'll understand why I brought it up, all right? So get out there and shake things up for your birthday, all right? That's why I brought it up for you. That said, let's get on with the read. That's why you're here. Your month is April. Your day is the 28th. Your sign is 7 to 9 degrees Taurus of the Taurus I period specifically. And your quality and element is fixed earth. All right, here we go. April 28th, the day of steadfastness. April 28 people are capable of using their physical, emotional, and psychological presence in an imposing, if not intimidating, way. Among the most determined people of the whole year, they will not give up once they have embarked on a project or a course of action. Against great odds, seemingly contrary to their best interests and that of those closest to them, they will hold out no matter how persuasive or commanding their opponents may be. The drive to manifest their position is powerful, and what they stand for not easily forsaken. Yet because April 28 people are good negotiators and politic in their daily lives, they often give the impression of being reasonable and even tractable. Though they appear accommodating, however, those who deal with them eventually discover that there is in fact only one possible compromise acceptable, and that is which is desired by the April 28 person. Promises be made, then letter reinterpreted, bent, or even broken, the reading says. And the ability of April 28 people to wait is almost inexhaustible. In fact, it is usually their opponents who wind up exhausted! Exclamation point. April 28 people attend to their personal appearance and their dress with great care. They realize instinctively that a first impression is often the most lasting one. Consequently, they will avoid losing the opening gambit of any life situation. And if mothers, they place their stamp squarely on the home, structuring the daily life of the family with respect to meals, hours, chores, and personal cleanliness. If fathers, they will lay down the law and fully expect to be obeyed. Life can be very difficult for everyone concerned if one or all of their children are more changeable, flexible types who resent such unyielding attitudes. More highly evolved April 28 people make superb friends, lovers, and parents because of their steadfastness in adversity and their utter dependability. They do well in positions of authority because they stay in tune with the feelings of their subordinates. And instead of ruling through fear, they guide and lead with vigorous, self-confident insight, thus avoiding catastrophe. But less highly evolved April 28 people manifest negative results over and over again through their stubbornness and their intractability. It is important for April 28 people to take themselves less seriously. They must beware of arousing antagonism in others by acting in a superior manner. Fighting battles for the disadvantaged and the downtrodden can prove far more rewarding. Finally, those born on this day must learn to let go once their children, friends, or associates are capable of doing without their support. Learning not to be needed is not always, learning not to be needed, to not always be in demand is important if April 28 people want to develop their philosophical objectivity to occasionally rest and observe life's passing scene. All right, a pretty well-rounded birthday breakdown, to be sure. And I say that for a very specific reason that I'll get to here shortly. That said, I'd like to provide a little bit of a commentary, if you like, on what we just went over. Also, maybe relations to days previous, the period at large, the book at large too. So let's dive into it. See what I had to say here. April 28th, the day of steadfastness. You're said to be capable of imposing not just a physically imposing presence, as is common with those born in days previous, but also emotional and psychological ways as well, which sets you apart from your Taurus peers. But I would say that if you are among some of the most determined individuals of the year, let me tell you, that must be saying something, because just going back all the way to the beginning of Aries, all right, there is no shortage of determined individuals, absolute go-getters. So if they're saying you're determined, geez, you must be, okay? And to say what you stand for isn't easily forsaken. To me, if what's come up for the values of those born on previous days, I imagine that must mean your integrity and your loyalty must be beyond reproach as well, because it was for them. All right. I also love this examination and the ability to bend people to the ends that you wish to manifest, not just because of your ability to wait them out, but to give the impression of being tractable, all right, or easily agreeable and easy to influence. Though be anything but. I love that they brought this up for you. How that dynamic is realized is beyond me, but I have a feeling it's this intrinsic and probably next to impossible trait to teach, all right? The reading goes on to round out the breakdown by way of relating parenting dynamics as well as higher and lesser evolved individual qualities and advice by which to avoid such pitfalls you may encounter considering your strong personality for a surprising relation for the day. Like I said, we'll get to the reasons why I say that shortly. But two specific elements I find of interest is this warning against arousing antagonism, all right, through acting superior specifically, as well as learning to leave friends and family to learn on their own when your support is no longer needed. While acting superior wasn't expressly mentioned, arousing antagonists for Aries individuals was replete through the period, okay? As for Aries 3 specifically, because they got too involved in the lives of their friends, family, and children. So it's very interesting. There's so many Aries qualities that seem to be seeded into this particular day. That said, acting superior, that wasn't mentioned for those other individuals. So that seems to be a novel trait just for you. Like I said, pretty interesting that all these little things that were kind of gone by the wayside as we transitioned into Taurus, they popped back up for you again. So I don't know why the Aries element's coming in here, but I might have an idea. So let's dive into your numbers and your planets. All right, let me get the book centered so I can try to stay in frame here. All right, I might be failing in that effort, I can't tell. Here we go. Those born on the 28th day of the month are ruled by the number 1, as 2 plus 8 equals 10 and 1 plus 0 equals 1, and by the sun. All right, and those ruled by the number 1 are typically individual of a definite viewpoint and eager to rise to the top. Because, as mentioned earlier, April 28th people tend to be dominant types. They must beware of being overcome by their power drives. The sun carries in its symbolism strong creative energy and fire, which should be directed steadily on the positive effects of Venus, the ruler of Taurus, rather than allowed to sporadically flare out of control. So the way that this reads is a little bit stifled. I think what they're saying is because of Venus's powers, you have to keep that fire moving slowly, all right? Like I said, it reads kind of funny, so I just wanted to be specific there. That said, let's dive into the notes again. No time to wait. Here we go. The number 1 and the sun, all right? Outward drive and human ego is one of the telltale marks of the sun that is said to be represented by it. Also striving toward unique individual expression with a tendency to be forthright, demanding, and able to transmit energy to others, as mentioned elsewhere in the book. Entries for sun-ruled days, by and large, they tend to be particularly hyper-focused on one particular character trait, and then relate how that dynamic is then perceived throughout the rest of the day, the rest of your life as it happens, all right? But it's usually just very specifically focused on that trait, and it doesn't really branch out into some of the finer things that I relate as a well-rounded day, to say your family, how you know, not just your career, but also your daily life, how you may be as parents, siblings, friends, and the like. Here, that was kind of broached into today, and that's not typical of a sun-ruled dynamic in the book. Usually it's just the focus on that trait and kind of how it parses out and how it applies in a very, macro kind of, or maybe micro, more of a micro kind of focus, not macro. Well-rounded macro, they dive into all those things I mentioned, so... but for this reason, I said today is also surprising. I think that they went on to the macro for you, not just that one specific focus. So dynamics of love, harmony, and appreciation, those belong to Venus. And not much of it was mentioned here today outside of keeping that energy flowing. So it's kind of a missed opportunity there, I would say. But yeah, like I said, with love, harmony, and appreciation of aesthetics, as well as a nurturing kind of nature baked in with Venus there, I would say that it's Venus's grounding and pragmatic realism that's heightened by the sun that helps you realize the steadfast resolve as a standout trait, if I were to guess. As there's no shortage of sun-ruled days, and that particular trait isn't really found there in a lot of occasions. So also this, they said one of the most dominating individuals of the year. Hey, it must be Venus has some kind of influence on the sun for that reason. Because I would say most of Aries probably got that consideration as well. Not the other sun-ruled days in particular. But in any event, that's basically what I had to say about your numbers and your planets. Let's move on to your tarot. That's right, one of the more eclectic of the New Age metaphysical ideologies, but hey, it's here in the book. We don't have to take it home and start dealing out the cards. What's interesting is it'll sometimes serve as a metaphor for the day, and they don't just cherry pick the card. It's on a rotation, so we'll have to see if it lines up. Some days it doesn't. Let's dive into it here. The first card of the major arcana is the Magician, who symbolizes intellect, communication, information, as well as magic. All right. Over his head is an infinity symbol, which in some tarot decks takes the form of a hat, and in others, a halo. Many interpretations may be drawn, one of which is that the magician recognizes the cyclical and unending nature of life and is empowered by this understanding. Positive traits suggested by this card include diplomatic skill and shrewdness, but negatively, a lack of scruples and opportunism. Sound like anybody we know? Oh, I think it might. Hey, let's dive back in, shall we? The Magician for intellect, communication, information, and magic, all right? Which I would say hits from the outset, all right? You make superb friends, lovers, and parents thanks to your dependability. Resolve against adversity there. You're always supporting the kids there if they're coming up against bullies, ostensibly. Also staying in tune with the feelings of your subordinates, not ruling through fear, which, as it happens, hasn't been a quality to come up with the domineering personalities in days past, so that's unique to you as well. Also taking notice of the critical nature of things and being empowered by that understanding. Hey, I would say that you have your pulse on some kind of a secret if you're able to persevere with these qualities that only belong to you. I can't remember exactly what it was, but maybe I'll remember as we get onto it. But it seems to me it ties in with this vigorous, self-confident insight and just a generic intrinsic ability to achieve what you're after. All right. What with, as they mentioned, your diplomatic skill and your shrewdness or your cleverness there. But I could also see how the traits of opportunism and a lack of scruples may be applicable as negatives, all right, assuming the breakdown applies. Because it sounded to me like you might jump at any opportunity to get ahead in no small part. That's a little bit of opportunism there, or a lack of scruples. So, hey, we just got to measure such things, all right? That said, that's been your tarot. I thought it was a pretty apt card as it happens, maybe even Hallmark, okay? That said, let's move on to your health. All right, your health. Generally, those born on April 28 are possessed of a robust constitution, but may nonetheless be vulnerable to heart problems, high blood pressure, or glandular imbalances, particularly of the thyroid and the adrenals. The whole trick for an April 28th people is to keep their energy flowing, avoiding blockages and flare-ups of suppressed emotions. Overeating may be a real danger because of a love for a wide variety of foods, and the eating habits of April 28 people must be structured and disciplined to avoid major physical problems. The physicality of this day should be directed toward competitive sports of all kinds. All right, interesting health entry too. Here we go. Let's dive into it. It said you're robust of constitution in the bargain, but you may encounter heart issues as it happens. I imagine there must be some stress in your life considering the aspects that they went over in the book, and it's also, hey, it's been part and parcel with the go-getters that precede you. So I have to assume that is a factor. And I would also assume that if you find ways to mitigate the stresses in your life, hey, a lot of the risks that they brought up probably be avoided or at least lessened. So it sounded like stress to me, all right? They also mentioned thyroid and gland issues, which is a common consideration considering the Taurus body areas, the ears, the throat, the palate, the stationary tubes and the like, all right? So mind the thyroid, take your medicines if you got those kinds of issues going on, all right? Also, they said keep your energy flowing, more of that sun relation there. Avoid blockages, okay? Kind of common the past few days there with the emotions specifically, so you're not alone in that respect. What else did they have to say here? They didn't really bring up exercise, not insofar as the typical health entry does. They'll say a moderate to mild or a strenuous exercise regimen, depending upon the planetary influences, at least by my reckoning. Yeah, but they did say competitive sports of all kinds, and I assume that's on account of the sun. Any other planet, like say Mars, they typically get an aggressive, combative kind of strenuous, vigorous kind of exercise recommendation. It's been largely absent for the most part, specifically through Aries when Mars was the ruling planet, despite the fact they mostly got moderate because they always were being go-getters. They got their exercise just intrinsically doing what they naturally do. Here for you, not quite sure why you got competitive sports. Kind of interesting. It typically only pops up on a Mars day. What else do I have to say here? Avoid overeating, also a common concern the past few days. Sedentary lifestyles has been popping up here ever since the Aries-Taurus cusp, which ended a few days back. I also have, what do we got here? Food recommendations coming up the past few days have been earthy foods on account of Venus being an earthy, grounded planet. So you got your fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and the like. Also, what else do they have here? Like I said, competitive sports for exercise is a huge change up. So it's usually mild to moderate. So flavor to taste, all right? Just make sure you're taking care of yourself in the bargain, all right? That said, that's been your health entry. Let's move on to some advice. All right, here we go. Your advice. What do they got for you? Try to take yourself less seriously, all right? Cultivate a greater capacity to have fun and be lighthearted. Think very carefully about the effects that your ideas and manner have on those around you. And above all, strive to recognize the feelings of others and remain sensitive to their needs. Okay, hey, you know what? As it happens, kind of common advice for the folks that have been popping up for early Taurus. So let's dive into what I had to say about what they had to say. Mind you, I might stifle a little bit because I had to write it in the book, so bear with me here. They said, take yourself less seriously and cultivate a capacity to have fun and be lighthearted. Enjoy the strong paradigm you fought so hard to establish, I wrote here, okay? Because it seems to me you're fighting for something. What is it you're fighting for outside of success, okay? Let's see, give yourself permission to do so, I wrote, okay? You have the permission if you give it to yourself. Despite probably being the one who gives it as seriously as you are. So you might have to change your outlook if it's something you want to change but you're having trouble with it. All right, I give permission to folks, give myself permission, all right? What else do I have here? Avoid stress and open up the emotions and the blockages, all right? Let's see, emotional blockage, we said that. Consider your effects on others, all right? Empathy won't only help you expand your diplomatic process, I would argue, but help you take your hands off the wheel of their lives as well, because they mentioned that's an aspect there. You might be a little too controlling with certain folks. I'm also going to help you avoid arousing antagonism. I have to assume that's in the bargain. I think they mentioned as much directly, but if they didn't, you know what, it came up for the Aries 3 folks, all right, and some of the Aries-Taurus cusp individuals. All right, what else do we have here? It also ties in with recognizing feelings and being sensitive to their needs as well. You know, you got to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the room, especially if you want your diplomatic skill to keep preceding you, all right? Keep evolving in that respect. It's only going to help you, I would say. Also help you better determine where you can best help, because we know you got the capacity for as much. They said as much, and that you were coming to the to champion your kids in the face of adversity. So maybe sometimes you got to take your hands off the wheel so they can do it for themselves. You got to know when the best moment for that is. So, if you're keeping your finger on the pulse of such things and putting that to practice, you might be able to better identify it, I would argue. Who's to say? Or maybe not. I don't know. So I'd have kids. So that's up to you. That said, that's been your advice. Let's turn to your meditation. All right, once more, let me get the book centered here, stay in frame. Here's your meditation, something to think about. It's possible that the earth turns, the stars dance, the comets sing, not because of gravity and Einstein's laws, but because of the power of love? That's a question mark. Once again, is it possible that the earth turns, the stars dance, the comets sing, not because of gravity and Einstein's laws, but because of the power of love? There you go. Don't quite know what to make of that for you, but hey, even if I had some kind of idea, I wouldn't tell you. It's your birthday, your meditation. It wouldn't serve you if I gave you my interpretation on it. Might influence it, who's to say? That said, that's been your meditation. Let's move on to your strengths and your weaknesses. That's right. Let's see where you got the girth and where you otherwise maybe a little more atrophied in the bargain. Let's see if we recognize anything from the breakdown. Sometimes we're surprised, all right? At least I am, all right? That said, your strengths, it says you're steadfast. There you go, a little whistling sound on the S. Dependable, and you're solid. All right, that might be the first solid I've come across. But your weaknesses, what could those be? Here we go. You're inflexible. All right, maybe saw it a little bit. Domineering, they definitely said that. And insensitive. All right, hey, none of that's news. All right, so there's the good news. All right, that said, I often like to make the case that our strengths can help us overcome our weaknesses. But in the same breath, or 2 or 3 after, I like to argue that our weaknesses can be strengths in and of themselves. Let's see if I can do the work here today and make a case for myself. Or it might turn into a clown show. Who's to say? Let's see what we got here. It says you're steadfast. Let me read the definition for that for folks who have an idea but are not quite sure, because that was me, all right? Loyal through thick and thin, and you hold firm promise of principle without wavering. All right, yeah, sounds about right, doesn't it? I would argue, though I couldn't have put words to it myself. I would have guessed. That said, you're steadfast, all right? You're going to establish a fortified foundation. You're loyal to yourself and your principles, and you're going to attack your weaknesses from a good place, I would say. Maybe the best place, who's to say. But you're dependable also. Hey, you can depend on yourself, I would say, too, all right? As you get after your weaknesses, you're going to find what needs to get done in order to approach such things. You're also solid. All right, I wrote down here because I was like, what would I say about solid? I don't want to fly by the seat of my pants on this. You're grounded. You're unbreakable. You're resolute of resolve, okay? Fortified, okay? You can always come back to that foundation if you need to reconcile yourself. But you're probably not going to be broken down because you're solid as you attack these weaknesses, all right? You just got a firm foundation at the very least, okay? That said, your weaknesses, how can those be strengths, all right? It says you're inflexible. Hey, sometimes at work, the job, maybe even the family life, there's certain things that we can't bow or break to, or bend or break, whatever you got to say. And you know what? There's a certain kind of leadership quality in that. That said, we got to have our finger on the pulse and know when to apply those things, the important things. Because other times, if you're inflexible when it doesn't necessarily matter, folks are going to take issue with that, I would say. And it's not going to be a good look. But you know what? I also got the idea that you were pretty open to certain things based on the breakdown, all right? So how much of a weakness is it? Maybe it's just at work that you're inflexible. I don't know. But same argument kind of applies. I know they said you take care of your subordinates too. There you go. Another argument against that too, surprisingly. But doesn't mean it doesn't apply. That said, I get the idea that you maybe have your finger on the pulse in that respect. So just be inflexible, the argument still stands. Be inflexible when it's necessary and figure out when to identify that. It says you're domineering. All right, hey, this stuff's been coming up the past few days. It's almost, there's no change seemingly. The stubborn Taurus bull. I wrote down here like you micromanage folks, I suppose, but you know what? Sometimes that's needed with certain folks. You know, coming out of the Marine Corps, there'd be folks that get yelled at. They needed that. They needed the whip crack because they were otherwise rather undisciplined. Other folks just needed to be asked, and if you cracked the whip, hey, they would take that personally. That's kind of who I was. I would actually kind of sandbag it if people gave me orders without being kind of nice about it, at least asking me. I knew it was an order if they were asking, but I still wanted to be treated with respect, all right? If you can't treat folks with respect, some folks are going to rebel a little bit, all right? Case in point, for better or for worse, all right? I also wrote down, what do we have here? Boy, I'm going to duck down here. It's too small to read. What do we got here? You strike an imposing figure, all right? That's huge. You're a domineering individual. Sometimes you just have to be, what do you call it? Put people back on their heels by showing your physical presence, okay? But there too, be aware that you have that characteristic, because some folks it might set them back, put them off their heels when you're not trying to convey that at all. So I would say it can work against you in that respect, but sometimes you need to have it. Say in the boardroom or you're trying to strike up a deal. Now that's when you put that face on, all right? Insensitive. How can that be a strength? I would say that means you got your emotions under control, all right? You come from a very pragmatic position. You're also not going to be affected by things that would otherwise affect other people. For better or for worse, too. I can see how insensitivity can be a bad look, all right? Hey, so-and-so's pregnant or whatever it is, they want to go on maternity leave. You're like, I don't care. The job needs done, all right? What? I don't think that's legal, but you get the point, all right? Hey, if you're sensitive to such things, hey, that's a you strike a compelling argument, let her have the maternity leave kind of thing. It's a bad example, but I think you get my point. That said, did I flounder? Yeah, probably a little bit, but I think my argument still stands. Use your strengths to overcome your weaknesses, but don't throw your weaknesses out altogether with the trash. They're part of who you are, and they're going to help you down the road with certain things, right? They can be used as strengths, if you like. That said, your strengths and weaknesses having been relayed, let's move on to those born on this day. And when we get on to those born on this day, not only do we get to see who shares your company, but I like to use this as an opportunity to maybe start thinking about a passion or a purpose in this life. Because all too often, a lot of folks I meet, hey, they just go to work day to day. So they're essentially rolling out of bed to hit the alarm clock so that they can make it to work on time to punch a clock, all right? And it's just to keep food on the table and a roof over their head, which is good, but what else are you living for, all right? So if there's anything I can wish for you on your birthday, it's to plant the seed of thought into what's my passion, what's my purpose, because if there's anything I wish for somebody, it's that they're chasing after that. And sometimes, probably most times, it takes maybe more work and dedication to figure out that passion than it does to even go after it. So let's keep that in mind as we see who shares your company and see what they did get in the book, what their ostensible passion was. Here we go. We start off with James Monroe, all right? The U.S. president instituted the Monroe Doctrine, banning foreign intervention in American continent. Also obtained Florida from Spain, supported anti-slavery position, all right? We also have, as it happens, Saddam Hussein, all right? The Iraqi dictator, domineering individual, steadfast too in his ostensible resolve there. So let's look at it from that position. Hey, were these folks steadfast? I would say so far, yes. Who else do we have? James Baker, Secretary of State. Oskar Schindler, Austrian businessman, Nazi Party member who saved over 1,000 Jews during World War II, and the subject of Schindler's List. We also have Odette Sansom. It says Hallows in brackets, a French resistance fighter, British Special Forces agent, and tortured by it at a Gestapo rather, and refused to talk. Steadfast. There we go. Charles Sturt, a British explorer of Australia. Jay Leno, the comedian of The Tonight Show fame. Kurt Gödel, a mathematician. Work described in a work by the name of Gödel, Esther, and Bach. We also have Yves Klein, a French concept and body art painter. Harper Lee, the novelist of To Kill a Mockingbird. Kenneth Kaunda, Zambian president, imprisoned by Rhodesia for founding the Zambian African National Congress. We also have Antonio Salazar, a Portuguese dictator, ruled for almost 36 years. Also Lionel Barrymore, stage and film actor. We also have Anne Margaret, the actress, singer, and dancer. Willie Colon, a Latin jazz trombonist, bandleader, singer, songwriter, and producer. Blossom Deary, a singer, a pianist, also a songwriter as it happens. And we have Kenido Shindo, Japanese film director, responsible for a work by the title of The Island, and also a producer in the bargain. Harry Luce III, a journalist and a publisher. Rowland Evans Jr., a TV journalist. And finally, Angana Enters, a dancer and a singer. Now, I know I probably mucked up a couple names there. Let me make up for it on my side of things. It's not done in malice, it's just hooked on phonics. Doesn't often work for me with the names there. But that said, did we recognize any names? One or two there. Most of them dictators as it happens. But you know what? Hopefully, I planted the seed for you. Got you thinking about your passions and your purpose, all right? If there's nothing else I can wish you on your birthday, it's that you're driving after that, all right? That said, that essentially rounds out your birthday reading, all right? Except to say your season is spring, your sign, once again, is Taurus, of the Taurus I period specifically, and your quality and elements is fixed earth. And this has been April 28th, the day of Steadfastness, from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and you Stelfers. I have an affiliate link for this book down in the description if you're interested in picking up a copy. It's right above a personal message I put together for the birthday boys and girls. So check those out if you're interested. This makes an amazing coffee table book, especially something if you want to get a party started off right. For better or for worse, it's going to get the conversation rolling. All right, and people are probably going to be leaving going, that was an interesting party. All right, so think about it if you're in the mood for something like that. That said, book having been related, that's not what's important here. No, like I said at the top, what's important here, wishing you a happy birthday. So once again, if your birthday was April 28th, hey, happy birthday, all right? And for everybody else who joined us ostensibly to celebrate, I'm hoping, well, I hope you enjoyed yourselves and you join us for your birthday reading. But before I go, like I said at the top also, your daily numbers, your 1 and your 5, 4, 6, all right? Get out there and let the universe show you it's with you on your path, all right? You see even just a couple of that happenstance occurrences, hey, you'll see why I brought it up for you. It feels like magic, all right? That said, hey, you know what? Keep driving after your domineering personality. You said you're one of the strongest of the year. Hey, you know what? We're not here to compliment people, but it just so happens to happen on occasion, all right? So, but yeah, I would say keep getting after everything. Just mind the insensitivities and strive for understanding of your own self-nature and constantly be improving. See where you may stumble and fumble. And pick yourself up. You're solid, domineering. You got the powers to do it, all right? But once again, you heard it here. Happy birthday, all right? Take care of yourselves. Get that stress out of your life, the thyroid and the heart issues and the like. We don't need that in your life, all right? So once again, thanks very much, and take care of yourselves.